Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Art Business Podcast. My name's David Bellingham. I'm the Programme Director of the Master's Degree in Art Business at Sotheby's Institute of Art. And my guest this week is David Preston, who is the CEO, I think, David?
Director of,
The director of Crown Fine Art, based in London, which is one of the world's best-known art logistics companies. So, David, very welcome to this podcast. Thank you for being a guest today.
Pleasure being here. Actually, it's quite nice to catch up too after so many years of knowing each other.
It is actually, and I think COVID probably interrupted it a little bit. But
it all started again a little bit more online than before. But it's always best whenever we come together. It's always been face to face, isn't it? And it's well, the world's changed a lot since COVID, so that's another podcast, I'm sure.
Absolutely, it seems like a long time since I was last down at your headquarters in Stockwell. And we might be talking more about maybe the planning of that building to make for smooth operations later.
I'm pretty sure you had a mullet, actually, David. I'm pretty sure you had a mullet last time you came down.
Well, I didn't have a mullet. I had blonde hair, but that's another story. So anyway, what's your favourite city, David?
My favourite city was always New York, actually. I just love the buzz, the energy, the fact that people always going somewhere. People go, everyone had something to do, and if you didn't go with it, you're kind of left behind a little bit. But I think as I've grown older, and probably a little bit more chilled out, I spent a lot of time in Italy, and my wife, actually, we got married, been together a few years, obviously, and then got married in the summer. And so it kind of feels like Rome's my second home now. Completely different pace, but I think that I've really adopted the kind of Mediterranean family value. Something which is very different in the UK, particularly where I'm from. We felt that family was very close, but it's only when you then go into a Mediterranean family that you realise how close family can be. So so Rome was a great city, great history as well, obviously.
So when did you first visit Rome?
I think I first went to Rome probably been a number of times, probably 30 years ago.
When you were younger.
Yeah. But obviously you start as a tourist, you carry on, and you go. I went to a couple of conferences there. But every time it felt different. But then my past, and we'll probably talk about that at some point, was I drive trucks across Europe, and I'd been to Rome a few times in a truck, in a van, and again you always see something different. So I think the thing about most European cities of doing driving for a living, as many art handlers do, you could be anywhere sometimes because you only ever see a warehouse. You go to Paris, you go to Venice, you could go to so many places, but you never get to see the city because you always stand in a hotel which is outside on the motorway. Or
absolutely, it's a problem for a lot of business people, isn't it? That they say, I'm off to LA next week, and you say, you're going to visit this and that, and they say, no, I don't have any time. It's a real shame.
You could be anywhere. You could be anywhere.
Yeah. Anyway, Rome is a favourite city of mine. And talking about driving, did you drive in Rome? Because I remember arriving there with my family a few years ago, and we hired a car from Fiumicino Airport. And I'd never driven. I'd driven in Italy before. I'd never driven in Rome. And they said, if you want, you can have one of these newfangled TomToms and make life easier. And we looked at the price. We thought, no, I'm okay. We can map read and everything. A big mistake. When we got home, there were 3 letters from Italian police on our doorstep in London with fines for going down Senza Unica roads, which is one-way roads the wrong way.
So what I've learned, and I've driven quite a lot in Rome actually, because when I go the Outlaws, they loan me their Fiat Panda, and it's pretty busted. There's every panel's dented and scratched, so I don't really have to worry too much about it. But it's all about eye contact. I've driven in Naples as well, which is worse. It's all about eye contact. If you don't look someone in the eye, you can do what you want. So cut across the lanes. They don't stop at pedestrian crossings because they don't make eye contact.
Absolutely.
So that's the tip. So when you're in London and you get somewhere in a hurry, Don't
Yes.
make eye contact.
I One thing I noticed when I was a pedestrian in Rome, I don't know if it's changed, is if you try and walk across what in the UK would be a legal right of way for a pedestrian, like a zebra crossing,
Yeah,
which they kind of have in Italy, but they don't have like the lollipops. They just have black and white stripes, or indeed a pedestrian crossing like a pelican crossing. They get really angry if you're on it legally.
yeah,
They kind of get very, very impatient and kind of, whereas if you actually look towards them, just walk across in front of them, they seem to kind of quite like that sense of anarchy. Oh, I'm going to respect you because you're walking across the road
yeah,
in
yeah,
front
yeah.
of
Don't
me.
make eye contact.
Yeah,
It is.
exactly.
You just have to
Yeah,
do it.
yeah. And
Yeah,
if you did that in London, of course, you'd be hooted out of hell, crossing the
yeah.
road. So it's really
Well,
fun.
I was in Rome last week. Funny enough, I went to Madrid and Rome last week, and I across the pedestrian crossing. There's a car parked on the zebra crossing,
Yes,
as they
absolutely.
do. And
Yes.
as the guy was getting into it, I gave him the hand,
Yeah.
and he kind of just looked at me, got in his car, and off he went. You know,
Yeah.
it's how it is.
They're very good at sort of being really insulting to one another, Italians, and then forgetting it. They're getting it off their
Yeah.
chest, whereas the Brits are so bad at that. You know, the road rage thing comes out
Yeah,
and it
yeah,
turns into a
yeah.
kind of GBH. You know, so I actually just one other thing I remember. I remember being with a group of students in Rome, and I shouldn't have done this, but I was talking to them about this that Italian drivers, if you just cross in an illegal manner, they respect you so long as you kind of look at them and put your hand out and wave and maybe
Yeah,
smile.
yeah, yeah.
And they said, don't believe you. So we're at the Colosseum, okay, just coming out the metro, crossing the road. That's one of the most dangerous
Yeah.
places in Rome for cars because it's multi-lane going round in a circle and everybody loves to race around it. And I said, look, I'm gonna walk across to the Colosseum with my eyes closed. And they said, go on then, don't believe you. And I did, and they were absolutely amazed. I said, but for God's sake, don't try this at home, kids. You know?
Yeah.
So
Well, you was telling them that story from the hospital bed, wasn't you?
absolutely.
Two
Oh
broken
dear.
legs.
Yeah, and I talking about your Fiat Panda with the dents in. I mean, you just don't care about having a dented car in Italy, and unless it's a hire car and you dent it, of course, that's a different story. But I remember coming in on a coach once with a group of students, and very often the coach hits the Colosseum and goes round it to find the hotel. And we were going around the Colosseum, obviously in a right to left direction. And we suddenly, the driver started swearing and looking down, and there was a Fiat Panda actually caught on the edge of the coach, like its wheel hub had caught on the something of the coach. And they
Yeah.
went round twice before the car, kind of swearing at one another, before the car fell off. And then they just didn't stop for insurance purposes, and they just carried on their way. It was
Just a scratch.
anyway.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, Rome's, any listeners who've never been to Rome, we're making it sound like a nightmare. As you say, it's an absolutely beautiful place that one just wants to constantly go back to, never exhaust. And the opposite, do you have a favorite place where in the countryside or by the sea that you can
Yeah,
chill?
and it's probably an emotive one actually, because being from southeast London, I think you find most people in London tend to stay on the same side of the river they're from. So people in, you know, in Essex will go to Southend, or people from the southwest will go to Brighton. Well, people in southeast London would generally go to Kent. So it was always, we kind of Thanet, Herne Bay, Margate, and always remember Margate and the amusements park. You know, it was great memories as a family growing up. And been back a number of times since. So, you know, working with the Turner Contemporary there,
Yeah.
with one of the corporate sponsors. It's a great place, and they're doing a lot for the community there. But it's always that past paradise, isn't it? You know, you think back, you go there, and you see the amusement arcades that you used to go to when, you know, you're 7, 8, 9 years old,
What's
and
it
life
called?
was
Dreamland.
simpler.
Dreamland.
Dreamland, that's it.
That's right.
Yeah,
And it
I was
closed
there. I was there in
down.
the summer
Yeah.
again. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And of course,
Great.
the reason all these places closed down, because I grew up in Gravesend on the other side of the
Okay.
Estuary.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But we just went straight down. We didn't have a car, so we just used to get the train. My dad worked for British Railways, so we all got free travel all the time. So at weekends in the summer, we just get the train, go down to Broadstairs, Ramsgate, Margate,
Yeah,
those
yeah.
places, Whitstable, and it was wonderful. And that was in, actually, I better, do I say the decade? That was in the 60s. Then, of course, what happened in the 70s was cheap air travel. So people with not that much money were suddenly able to afford, instead of staying in wet England, they were able to go for quite cheap package holidays to Lorette de Mar, and that's what we did, and everybody else was doing it. So all of those lovely seaside towns, as you know, became abandoned, and it's only recently that they've started doing them up. And what's significant, I think, for our listeners is the way they do them up is usually centered around art. So you've got, as you say, Turner, Margate, and you've got the Folkestone Triennial art Triennial. And it's so interesting the way art is used for regeneration in that manner.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on that note, just we went down to Kent because we were one of the poor sods who couldn't afford to go on a plane. I think my father never went on a plane until he was probably 61.
Yes.
So so yeah, it was always UK holidays for us as a family. The car.
Well, that's strange.
Nell's Cafe in Gravesend on the way.
Oh, right. Yes.
The A2 there. Yeah.
Do you remember Laughing Waters on the A road as you went past? Do you remember that? The restaurant? Used to go fishing on the lake there, hence Laughing Waters. When I was a kid. Actually, that's changed, hasn't it? Because we were under 10 and we had bikes, and weekends we go up there and play in the woods and fish, and no one worried about us. It's what a change. I don't think kids under 10 would do that anymore. But anyway, lovely. So you reminded me of all those wonderful childhood days. And anyway, so do you have a favourite building? And don't say Crown in Stockwell, but you might do.
Oh, let's not talk about Crown. Who wants to hear about Crown? I mean, yeah, they're good company, but we're not here to talk about Crown.
Well, we'll be talking about them later.
Yeah, Natural History Museum has always been a favourite. I think I used to drive past it so often. Natural History Museum.
Oh, yes.
Kensington. No, not really. I think the Natural History Museum has always been there for me. Yeah. Which is odd because I'm a much more non-conformist, contemporary, conceptual type person. But for me, it was just, maybe it was the first museum I went to with the school trip and was always in awe of it. And it just flashed back to me when I was an adult. I don't know, but always had a soft spot for that building. Yeah,
no, same here. And I guess when it was built, I think the architect was a late Victorian architect, Waterhouse, if I remember, not the painter, another one. And those lovely kind of Gothic revival, the Romanesque revival rather, not Gothic. The animals that obviously are site specific for the actual museum.
That's right, but I think it's slightly digressing. I think, having worked so long also at the airport, I think I really like airports. I don't know. I'm not going to say aesthetically, but again, if it kind of provokes an emotion, then I think airports are great. I think airports are great for your well-being. So what's your favourite building? The departure lounge at an airport when the flight's on time.
Yeah, drinking pints at 4 a.m. because you're going to the other side of the world where the time difference is. But no, I mean, obviously airports I think what you're saying is that they're obviously very atmospheric because a lot of people are excited by in 2 hours we're going to be in the heat. And it's usually, well, I suppose you're going on business, so that's maybe different. But
I used to work there. I used to work, a big part of my career
was
working
at the airport, come to that. So, no, I agree. And I remember going around to Stansted Airport with some students. We were going to Pompeii actually we had a great week. We were kind of actually doing a lot of archaeological observational work there, which was wonderful for classic students. But I remember we had to leave West London at 4 a.m. to get a bucket shop priced flight from Stansted around the M25, and it's Stansted is Richard Rogers, and it had just recently been built, and at the time Richard Rogers was really, well, he still is, but it was really exciting, and that was a great experience because it had only just opened.
Yeah, it was high roofs, lots of glass, whereas the traditional airports were prefabricated, kind of concrete, Hayward Gallery style, concrete jungles with lots of asbestos, But it just reminded me then of a story which I used to work at all the airports in Europe and the country, and Stansted, there was a huge collector who had bought a lot of objects in the UK to ship to another country in Eastern Europe, and sent his own aircraft over. It was an Antonov 1424, one of the two. It was It's one of those big aircraft with two propellers. The back comes down, and you basically push everything up a ramp to get into the back of the aircraft. There's no hydraulics or anything to help you with it. You use your
Sort of
forklift.
Indiana Jones plane.
That sort of thing, yeah, where the car falls out the back, that kind of thing. So, so the aircraft turned up. We had a big Arctic lorry on the apron. Out comes the artwork straight into the back. You know, it was a full Arctic and a full aircraft. And then we'd finished. Just as we finished, we tied everything off. We jumped off the aircraft very quickly. The door closed, and the crew ran around the back of the aircraft and got back into the aircraft again. And started the engines. We're thinking this is all a bit bizarre, and the engines are firing up, and now the Arctic is still behind it and it's starting to wobble. Thinking what's going on? And so the drivers got in the Arctic, and for those who don't know, an Arctic's a huge, long 40 foot, 18-meter truck. We moved it out of the way quickly, and then the engines, and it starts to move, and then all of a sudden, 4 airport security vehicles come racing around the corner and blocked in the aircraft because they hadn't paid their landing fees. So, and they hadn't got permission to take off either. And so whoever this guy had organised to pick up these artworks, they was hoping probably to keep the 20 grand's worth of landing fees and handling fees, all the help they got at the airport and so on, and just get onto the taxi, get onto the runway. Ryanair, you can wait. I'm going now. And off they would have gone, with all that money, extra money in their pocket.
I thought
style.
That's amazing. I thought you were going to say that it was it's because they suddenly realised they had endangered species with the art objects, or
no,
they were.
But out the window came a stack of money in cash, which were given to this. That was their land. They paid in cash and landing fees.
Paid in
I mean,
cash.
we're talking 15, 20 years ago now, but.
Yeah.
Quite an experience, that one.
When you could hand over 20 grand or more in cash in an art gallery, no questions asked.
Yeah, exactly.
And David, what about music? Do you have any kind of particular music that you would go for? If Desert Island Disc question, what would you take to a desert island if you could only take one?
I love Desert Island Disc. I've probably thought about it for many years, listening to Desert Island Disc, but never really thought I'd be asked that same question. And I asked my son it actually as well, and he would say something like, "I'll take my mobile phone," or whatever it would be. But I don't know if I'm allowed to say this anymore, actually, but I actually quite like Michael Jackson. I like R&B generally, and I grew up in Peckham in South London, where it was a big Caribbean demographic there, and a lot of friends are from that region originally. So R&B has got a kind of a neo soul music. My father liked soul music and Luther Vandross and all that sort of stuff when he was growing up. So very much a soft spot there. But I quite like Michael Jackson.
We're allowed
to say that these days, but I guess so.
I don't think Michael Jackson has been. I mean, he's not Gary Glitter. And I'm probably not even allowed to say Gary Glitter. I don't think he's ever been quite.
No.
You know what I'm saying. It's a matter of degree, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. But no, I do like Michael Jackson to get the foot tapping and.
I mean, what an amazing dancer, an amazing musician. I remember in the school discos when he was little with the Jackson 5, and he would sing Rockin' Robin and these lovely slow songs like "Got to Be There." I mean, heartbreaking. Wonderful, wonderful musician and singer. Yeah. Whatever happened to him later in life.
Yeah, so that's the sort of music I like, really. Yeah.
I'm there. Tamla Motown label.
Motown label, yeah.
Yep, 45 RPMs. Yeah. And what about art?
I'd love to know what that question actually, and I think, in all honesty, I think might be in the minority. I've worked 30 years now in the art market, and I'm probably in the minority to say that I haven't got a huge passion for art in the same way as for the colleagues here. Some have got bachelor degrees in fine art history or are artists themselves. So all the people I know professionally are linked to the art market and have generally got a passion for it. But for me, growing up, we didn't have access to art. If I'd have said to my father at 16, can I have £10 to go to an art gallery in London, he probably would have given me a slap and told me, why are you not going to the cinema to see Die Hard?
Or Charlton Athletic.
Oh, come on, not Charlton, but yeah, but that same sort of thing, right? So we never had art in our family. There wasn't that. That was a middle class, a
Yeah,
middle to upper class
yeah,
recreational thing was to go to a museum or a gallery, or you go with the school, be bored
yes,
for a day, you know. But
yeah,
no, so for me, I think I've grown to appreciate it, and I kind of know what I like. And I think probably go back to that musical point actually in that past paradise. That for me, I think if it provokes an emotion in me, generally it's quite that's when it feels
yeah,
successful on that basic principle. Whether it's something more traditional or contemporary, conceptual, I think if it, and you know, you could go back to when you was 18 and you was in your first relationship, and the girl you thought you was going to love for the rest of your life told you to do one and not come back again. You know, I think you know, you think about those times, and if you know that artwork could resonate in there. So
yeah.
yeah, for example, I saw a Frida Kahlo exhibition. I'm going to
Mhm.
go, I don't know, 15 years ago, maybe at the Tate, it was Tate Modern, and I kind of had to leave halfway through because it was the way she was looking at me. The way the phrase through
I
the
get
while
it.
I was looking at me, I started to feel physically sick, and I think I linked that back to kind of childhood trauma.
Uh,
So
how
strange as it
interesting.
was, but then you could say, you know, that was quite successful. To whether that was the intention of the artist, but no,
It
along the way,
might well have been, might well have been. But
I've
what
got.
I love about what you're saying, David, is that one of the first things we say to our students who've done art history courses, we say, look, when most people when they go into an auction house, if you see collectors, most of them are wanting something for their home.
Yeah.
There may be the odd one buying at the high end who actually, like Pinot, who has a big collection, or Saatchi or whatever. Most people want something that they're passionate about, and so we say you've got to start looking at art as though you're a child, and stop
Mm.
all the intellectual stuff. That is very important as well. But start looking at art the first time round as though you're a child on an emotional level.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think
Mm.
the general principle of my collecting is it provokes an emotion, but also you've got to look at it.
Yep.
You have to look at that artwork every day.
Yep.
So I could think of nothing worse than owning the Frida Kahlo.
He's staring down at you all the time.
Exactly. It could, you know. So yeah, you're right. You got to look at it like a child sometimes.
I remember at the start of COVID, some of our MA contemporary art students, four of them, they started this wonderful podcast because they were missing one another, and doing it all remotely. They all gone back to their own countries, and it was such fun. It was called Charts, which means chat about art. You can still look it up on something like Spotify. There are other platforms, and their whole mission was to make art easy for people to listen to. So they take a topic like what is medieval art, and it was hilarious in some ways, but they were just trying to make it less highfalutin than most people would make it, if you like. And
Mm-hmm.
what was I going to say? Oh yeah, they had one of the themes one week was about, I can't remember what they called it. It was something like um, uh, art related to ghost stories. So they were talking like you're talking about Frida Kahlo, and they'd searched the web and they'd found all of these examples of people who bought like portrait paintings and hung them in their kind of country mansion or whatever, and they had to get rid of them because the portrait came to life, or that came out a bit Harry Pottery. So that was a really funny episode. So I get where you're coming from with that, and I've had works on my walls, and I've got rid of them in the end because I in the end, for whatever reason, I just get either fed up or I just suddenly don't like
Yeah.
it.
Well, there's one which I've repurposed, and I won't go into the detail of that. It's a work by Bruce McLean, which I had in a previous relationship,
Hmm.
and got divorced,
Yeah,
and I can't bear to look at it because
it reminds
it's
you.
too it reminds you of of those times. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's funny that maybe this is if you've got a load of ex-students who listen to this, it might be you might recall back in the 80s those crying girl portraits, the crying child.
Oh
Do you
yes,
remember those?
yes,
You know,
yes.
and
Yeah,
I think you could probably look those up. And I don't think many people would probably know about that, but
yes,
outside the UK. But it was a portrait of a crying girl,
yeah.
and
No, I
they were
do
supposed to be
remember.
bad luck, weren't they? And
Yeah.
fair
No, it's
mass
interesting.
produced.
It's interesting what art does, and nothing's new. Um,
Mm.
so So, David, thank you very much for all that. And
It was a long intro there, wasn't
it was great. It was
it?
great because we've already talked quite a lot about art.
Hmm.
So chat about art. So, can you say something about when you began to get interested in like security, working in security? Where did that come from? And then
Yeah.
maybe your experience then and working in presumably airport security before you actually started becoming like an art logistics person.
Oh yeah. Well, where to begin? It's always difficult to talk about yourself, actually. And you probably, how many times have you ever talked this long about yourself? Probably never, right? My wife probably tells me I talk about myself all the time anyway, but
Well, now's your chance.
now's my chance. Yeah, yeah. No, so academically, I didn't get great qualifications at school. I left school, didn't get my qualifications. I already had a job. In my family, the moment you become 16 and eligible to work, you're going to work.
Mm,
So I got a job in a removal company and worked in the warehouse, pushing a broom, doing whatever they asked me to do. And
mhm,
um, yeah, they saw potential in me, which was nice. And I think if I really think back about those attributes I had as a 16-year-old, my dad had three jobs. He used to buy and sell things at car boot sales, buy and sell cars. He used to do security at the company he worked at. He used to make cranes. I mean, he was a bit of a jack of all trades. He would do odd jobs for people. And I think, my mother was a school dinner lady and fitted in with the family routine, right? So, but what I would say about that was that my dad knew how to communicate, how to network. And, you think about, you got someone who's looking for a television to buy, right? And that television, the guy wants to sell it for £100. He'll know someone who wants to buy a television and he'll sell it for 120. Everyone would be happy because they bought a television, sold a
yeah,
television, he's earned £20 out of it. And that's what he used to do. And so he used to, I think that was the value of money was important
yeah.
in
I
the house.
remember the same.
We
I
didn't
remember
have
the same.
any, we didn't have
Yeah.
any money to go
And
on and
there was
big
no such
holidays.
thing as credit cards. So to get
No,
into debt was considered really, really bad form. So you just had to go without.
exactly. They went without, and they saved up, and they bought things. They looked after us,
Yeah,
and and
good.
they did what they had to do that. So
Yeah,
I felt the value of working and the value of effort, work ethic, and so I couldn't rely on my qualifications, and I wasn't ever going to go into further education. So really got a job, and I would say through hard work and diligence. They saw something in me, and I was at a
mm,
company called Constantine. Was there for 4 years. They used to have a removal company called Evan Cook in Peckham, and they had
mhm,
an art division, and I started working within their art division. And come the age of 18, they asked me if I would go to the airport and help out with a couple of little art handling things there and go in some vans and then drive a van and then meet this courier from this museum. Um, and then, yeah, before you know it, I'm working on projects and exhibitions which are happening. And I still remember to this day a few of them, from 25, 30 years ago. Fabergé exhibition at the V&A. I remember, picking up Fabergé eggs in, and I won't go too much into that because I don't want to breach any kind of confidentiality,
yes.
but, how we used to
I
do that.
remember the show. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. And, private aircrafts at Luton, which were going straight to St. Petersburg, it was a life I'd never experienced or imagined, being the boy from Southeast London where, you know, going up central London was like a big event.
Yeah.
I'm here
I
at
remember that.
Airside on the
Do you
town
remember?
in
Do you
Enfield.
remember you come out at Charing Cross and there's Lyons Corner House that you go in there for tea and it was really posh?
No, no, we used
You
to
don't
get the
remember that
train
one?
up to, we used to get the tube up to Elephant and Castle to
Oh,
Oxford
you
Circus.
came in
So
at
we used to come
Elephant
up Oxford
Castle.
Street.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
go to
Yeah.
Oxford Street, and that was it. Everyone was
Yes.
on top of you. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I got into kind of security by chance, really. And I think if I was to say, how did you get into it? I think I didn't really have a career path. I just
Yeah.
went with, I'd like to think, good customer service,
Mm,
having the pride in what I did. And,
mm,
I think that sometimes I look back and maybe I was a little bit too dedicated. I'd work like a donkey. I would work and work. And if someone said, we need you to go to Paris in 10 minutes, I'd have been in the van in 9.
yeah.
And, through that, I've got life experience and, and met
Do
some
you do
amazing
you
people.
do you recall feeling excited by it, by what things that were quite exotic compared to like your background? Go flying
Yeah.
into. You know, it
Yeah.
must have been absolutely wonderful. I remember my dad, I think, quite early on realizing that I was lucky to get a scholarship into a public school in Rochester, and I think he recognized that he needed to take me, so he took me to Rome, and when I was 12, and I just look back at that and think how lovely of him to see that
Yeah, yeah.
that was something that would help. And to be honest, I'm sitting here now, and it's probably him taking me to Rome, and then we went down to Pompeii for a day that led me. I did my PhD in
Mm.
Pompeii. It's amazing how your parents or folks can give you an opportunity. But I hope my students are listening to this, because I think what they should get from this is that hard work can get an attitude. Good
Yeah.
attitude, a work ethic can get you an awful long way. And I know employers in the art world, they get rid of you very quickly if they don't think you've got that work ethic and that good attitude, whoever you
And
are.
the common sense, and just
Yeah,
taking things really practically at times, not overcomplicating it. And I think what we do in art handling isn't particularly rocket science. I
no.
don't think my trade isn't. I like to think of myself. You introduced me earlier on as a director of Crown Fine Art, and that is in some degrees logistics and art handling and security and shipping. But that's the easy part. The
Mm-hmm.
harder part is I like to think of myself as helping the art market further their interests in the art market, and that could be your interest, David, is to help students at the beginning of their career or upskill or learn new things to progress their life and progress their education. And mine's to help my clients, and I'm helping you do that, right? You're in the art
Yeah,
market, and we help each other do
absolutely.
that. But for
Yeah.
me, if it's a collector who's looking to sell an artwork, and I so happen to know an art advisor who might be looking for one, then I'm going to help them out with that.
Yeah.
If there's if a small artist, let's say a small artist, an artist who's got an artwork for £1,000 they want to ship to Canada, I'm going to help them out with that. And it's
Yep.
not about the shipping part; it's actually understanding why they wanted to do it, how important it is for them, and I think that's what's most enjoyable. And I think hopefully you relate to this. I think the older you get, the more you want to help, the more you
I
want to kind of
agree.
feel like you
Yeah.
can give something back, because
Yeah.
we are in a market which I think when you first come into it, and you mentioned about going to Rome when you're 12, and it's overwhelming to some degree. The wealth, the
Absolutely.
the prestige of the objects, the clients,
Mm.
I'm not going to say it's the dark arts, but it's a market which, I mean, you've seen a lot of books come out recently with tell-all books where people have been talking about their experience in the art market, right? It's a little bit behind the scenes, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think,
There's some very good sort of like what I call airport books about Sotheby's Bond Street, its history,
yeah,
and anecdotal books. They're wonderful.
mm,
But yeah, no, I think that, but surely that's good, that you see your primary enjoyment of your work as assisting the smooth running of that
yeah,
art world. I think it's really
yeah.
great. Yeah.
And maybe
And
that's how I compartmentalize it, because I think by virtue, I'm someone who likes to innovate and challenge and disrupt.
mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think if I was just had a different personality preference, I'll just be looking at processes and
Yes.
improving what already exists.
Yes.
So no,
Yes.
I've spent a lot of my time trying to think about what the future might look like actually, and
Yeah.
innovate.
Do you
But
think do you think looking back that you could have you could have found yourself in a completely different world and job and still enjoyed that?
I think I often thought this actually. I think I'm not wedded to the art market. I feel I could easily switch sectors,
Yeah.
and
So you could go into, for example, standard logistics, like moving goods around the country, not necessarily art goods, or do you like the
I
fact
think
that
I
it's
might be a
art?
bit bored by that.
Yeah.
I think I'd have to. I think whatever I did, I'd want to be the best at it.
Hmm.
So I always said I could be a street sweeper, but give it 6 months and I'll be running the street sweeping depot.
Interesting.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so I'm quite
That's
handy as well. I don't, you see my hands. I've just been doing some painting and decorating and some building work at the weekend. Got a few
mhm.
cuts and scratches, and I'm really handy. So I think I could turn my hand at most things. But what you won't get, and you can agree with this, the variety of what we do every day.
Yeah, I do
You've
agree.
always got something different.
Yeah.
to encounter in anything we do, and
Yeah.
particularly in
And
this industry.
I would imagine that in art logistics, the art, each piece of art is unique. That's what makes art different from a lot of other commodities. And I guess the challenge is, you can suddenly be challenged by, oh, I've got to move this Damien Hirst animal in formaldehyde. How am I going to do that? What are the
Mm.
laws about formaldehyde? If I,
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
there's always a new problem that you have to find a solution for. I would guess.
You're right. There's lots of that, and vehicles getting delayed in Europe, or even getting a tyre blowout on the motorway.
Sure.
They really set the anxiety off. But that's also what's quite interesting about it. Anything can happen at times, but I think it's really the clients which make it
Yeah,
really
interesting.
interesting.
It's a people
The people
it's a
you come
people
across.
it's a people job. And again, one of the advices I give my students, who are, most of them are pretty young, and I think they've come through COVID, and so they've lost, I think, a lot of that ability to network,
Yeah,
physically with people, and they're struggling with that. But I think that hopefully they listen to this and realizing that, you never give up. You just get out there again and meet people and go into galleries and start talking to people. And the art world is not, there's not an obvious career structure in the art world. You know
no.
that. It's different from
Mm.
other worlds. So you don't use a lot of these jobs you don't see advertised. So it's more about attitude, and I think, and showing that you're willing to work and learning on the job in many ways. I mean, I don't think you're unique, actually. I've spoken to a number of people, since I've been involved with this art world, and people departmental specialists at Sotheby's who said that they started as a porter and
Yeah,
they
yeah.
just taught
Right.
themselves. They went to night college, they learned art history at Birkbeck or whatever. And
Mm,
because
mm.
because often they would know a lot more about art, the practical side of it and the valuation ideas of it, than someone who'd like gone to the Courtauld and studied the history of art.
That's right. Yeah, 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 yeah. It's interesting. We get quite a few, students who have been on your course, for example, and we've had a
Mhm.
few working for us, and
Mm.
um, I think that knowledge has really helped them. But they've also displayed practical skills and common
Yes.
sense, and I think that's something they've had to work on. You're
Yep.
right.
Yep. I mean,
It's good to get
just as a
yes.
just as a little story, David. The stories, when we have our degree ceremony, often the parents of the students come for that, and
Mm.
a very common comment from the parents to me is, we can't believe what's happened to our daughter. You know, when she's a year ago, all she could talk about was art, and we thought, oh, she's very arty. When is she going to get a job? And they said that she's completely changed. We can now talk about business, about finance, and that is the greatest commendation, I think, and the greatest sense of gratitude to what we do, I think, for students.
Yeah, and I think it's funny. There's a guy here who he left school at 18, went to grammar school, great grades, didn't want to go into university, couldn't think of
Hmm.
anything worse, in fact. So he's been brilliant over the last 2 3 years, and I think you've got to monetize your talent, and
Yes.
I think whether you like it or not, we all have to pay for ourselves. And I think you read and listen to the news, read the papers. Kids on average now are going to stay at home until they're 37 or something, isn't it?
Yes.
And you take
My
mortgages
son,
out
my
now. What's
son
the
is
kids
down
going to
is
take it
working
from?
from home below where I'm speaking now on a
Yeah,
call.
yeah. And it is really tough for that generation. I think we're really
Yeah.
fortunate, but his talent, he's got a fantastic talent, and he's got to learn how to monetize that.
Yeah.
And I think the
Absolutely.
students, when they come into your course, when
Mm.
they leave, I think they've
Yeah.
got a better understanding on what their passion,
Yes.
monetize your passion or what you've got a
Yes.
real passion for.
Yeah.
And you'll find, and the thing is, what always amazes me is the diversity of what careers your students go into, actually. It's
Yeah.
not always administration. Some start their own businesses, some travel, it's phenomenal, actually. Really,
Yeah.
really good. It's a pleasure always being part of that for a number of years.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. The course is deliberately broad, so we never dive deep into any one thing. But employers of our students say that that's what makes them valuable to them, because they can turn to them and say, "Do you think there might be a legal issue here?" And my students know enough about law. They might need to suggest they call a lawyer, but they know enough about it to say, yeah, you will need to pay this tax, or there may be an
Yeah,
ethical issue that they understand as well. But they could also you know, if an employer says, could you sit down and do an index for me in an hour for this artist, they can do that as well, you know. So yeah, it's kind of we like to think it's interdisciplinary, but also teaches them lateral thinking. So instead of just focusing, as a lot of academic courses do, on one thing, they have to be able to think about not just about art, but about art from different periods, different places in the world, different materials, how the law affects those things, all sorts of things, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think I just want to plug, but my
yeah.
wife, as a photographer, she worked in the art market, and she took one of your courses. Actually, paid a few £100s for it. It was an abstract course, learn about
Okay.
abstract art and that movement, and she found it incredibly beneficial to her career. Actually, so I felt it was a great investment for her to invest in her own career, and it
Mm.
was a short course and it's really easy to follow. So there you go,
That's
plug in your
amazing.
course, your
Do
courses at the
are
institute
you
there.
able to say what she's working on now? What her work is?
Well, she's a photographer now,
Of
so
course, you said that she's a photographer. Yeah,
yeah, she's a photographer now. Yeah,
yeah.
so but when she was working in the art
How
market,
interesting.
she was networking, and she felt she wanted to be able to hold her own a little bit more in conversations about the market she was working in. Go
Yeah,
to an exhibition, and you mentioned yourself. I mean, she wasn't looking for a job at the time, but people to people, that's how this market works generally. And I think the impression you can give when you're networking, you're going to start having conversations about what you can bring. And I think that knowledge really gave them more confidence to have conversations about other things.
exactly. I think it. I think that's it. A lot. You know, we get an increasing number of students who are coming from nations where they don't teach art history, and so we have
Mm.
to work out ways that they can do online courses like those, so that they become they understand some of the vocabulary, some of the ways that you talk about art, and I guess that's what your wife got from that.
Yeah, 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 definitely.
David, you've already mentioned Constantine. I believe that presumably, I mean, Constantine is another art logistics company, isn't it? Is that the point when
Yeah.
you started working with art, or was it?
It was, yeah, it was, yeah, yeah, yeah. So they had a removal business, and they used to
Yeah,
be a crossover between the removal and the art business. So I then
that's
started
right.
working in the art business, and then got to around 2021 and went to join Momart as their kind of first full-time airport person. So
Mm.
worked for them for 15 years, and
David, can I
dreams
just interrupt? Could you,
amazing.
because
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
aware that some of the listeners may not, could you explain what Momart is?
Yeah, yeah. So Momart's the equivalent of Constantine, art handling, art logistics
Yeah.
company who um, I don't want to go on too much and bore people with the way the art handling market works, but generally Constantine was more kind of traditional art,
Interesting.
whereas Momart's much more
Antiques.
contemporary
Yeah.
art,
Yeah.
much more
Yeah.
commercial art rather than heritage, and
That's
so
right. Yeah.
yeah, and so they were building up their museum division, and I used to work at the airport for them, looking after shipments with couriers who might have been travelling from the Met or any of the
So
Louvre.
what did a typical day in that job entail? Was it like meeting someone off an art courier off a plane?
Yeah, yeah, it would be. So on the outbound, it'd be 2 o'clock in the morning, probably wake up, go and pick someone up from home at 2:45, take them to the museum, load the truck, take them to the airport, go into the cargo terminal, make sure the airline didn't, smash the artwork up, which belonged to the nation.
Yeah, so you're
And
literally there as a witness for insurance
witness loading, yeah,
purposes. Yeah.
but more so, it was probably more an advisor because it was always very peculiar kind of freight we would handle. Tall,
Mm.
thin, upright crates rather than square, shoe boxes. So we would always really probably do it ourselves, and they'd watch us do it, but
Mhm.
allow us to come in and do that. And then I had a real privilege of after that we used to take the courier, the museum employee, over to the terminal and wait for the aircraft to go. And then we'd go on the tarmac and watch the aircraft being loaded and the cargo going on the aircraft. And we do the same in reverse.
Mm.
So, but I could easily sit with a museum courier for anywhere between 8 to 15 hours.
Because the flight was delayed.
Yeah, or because it was such a big shipment, you'd pick them up from home at 3 in the morning, and the flight wouldn't go until 10 at night, or and obviously you wouldn't be in each other's pocket the entire time, but
Mm.
you end up talking about things, whether that be marital issues or Italian cathedrals,
Yes.
but
But
you wouldn't
also
believe
learning all the time about art, because people, it's just the language, it's just the language you're using about the work you're doing.
privileged, so
Yeah.
privileged to meet so many keepers at the British Museum,
Yeah.
conservators at the Tate, registrar. I mean, it was so wide ranging that I got so much experience from those guys.
Yeah.
And when someone started talking about Turin, I probably never wanted to go to Turin, but then you think actually it's a really interesting place to go and visit. And um, yeah, honestly, amazing. So many
Mhm.
amazing people. And then that obviously went into art fairs and traveling with art fairs. And
Mhm.
I keep going back to the word privilege, but I'm so privileged to
Mhm.
have met so many amazing people. And I looked at your list of people on the podcast, actually,
Mhm.
many I know.
Yes, I'm
Um,
sure you do.
Again, who would have thought at 16 when I left school, pushing a broom, that I'd have traveled, I would have carried the ashes, the cricketing ashes, or gone to Australia to
Did
train
you
people.
really? You really
Yeah,
carried the cricketing ashes
really carried
as
the
a kind
cricketing
of
ashes
as like as a cultural object.
as a cultural object. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Um,
Had
I know.
England won them that year, or was it Australia?
We went to Australia. We, as England, went to Australia. I think we won it. Or did we lose 5-0? I can't remember. I've slept since
Probably.
then. So, um,
It's
yeah,
pre-Bazball.
Jimi Hendrix guitar, stuff like
Really?
that.
Wow.
Amazing. So
Yeah,
privileged.
all of these things.
Yeah,
It is privilege because you're not just talking about fine art, but you're actually talking about cultural objects, which can include popular culture, like Jimi Hendrix's guitar, or the sports objects like the cricket ashes. I
all
guess I
aspects.
won't explain that. I won't. It's a long story to explain to the listeners who don't know anything about cricket what the ashes are. They can look that up using a
Yeah,
search
yeah.
engine, I think. But you then joined Crown Fine Art in 2012, like MoMA and Constantine, another can I say London-based art logistics company?
Well, more global based actually.
Global, exactly.
Constantine
Yeah,
were more
yeah.
UK based, whereas Crown were more global based.
Yes,
Yeah, I
exactly.
just saw it as an opportunity to further my career. Really, the size of
Yes,
Crown at the time in the UK was a tenth of the size of Momart. So, an
yes.
opportunity to run a business. Never look back actually. Well, all do I say? Momart and Constantine, got great people working there. We still talk to each other now. We meet each other
Yep,
at conferences, and
yes.
I look to a couple of guys in particular at Constantine as being role models. Actually, when I was young, I've got a lot to owe them. I owe to them for my career, and so yeah, they work from competitors now, but as people, a lot to owe them. And
Mm.
I'm falling their side. They hate me now, but we professionally, we're obviously always in competition, but personally, there's no animosity, and we're it's all good. Which is again
That's,
great about the art market. And there's
yeah.
something you said earlier on about networking, that generally in this market, people remember assholes. Arseholes don't go very far. You're gonna have to beat that out, probably. I don't know if you're gonna have to put the E. You're gonna
That's all
probably
right.
twist it on there. If I say assholes, it's different. People remember those, and I think you can easily burn your bridges.
Mm.
Such an
No,
incestuous
absolutely no.
market,
That's
so
it's a very small
incestuous.
world, and if you put someone's back up or behave in an unethical manner, it can damage you for the rest of time. So I say to my students, don't we had an exam today? Don't cheat in the exam because it just become a habit and through life, and then one day you're going to get your comeuppance.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So
um,
yeah, it's been interesting.
and when you joined in 2012 Crown Art, was it in the building that I visited in Stockwell? Has it always been there?
No, it was in a really rundown warehouse in on the Old Kent Road, which is a
Wow.
southeast London, and
Yes.
it wasn't really. I don't think what happened. Crown had bought a business which really couldn't invest any more money in it because it was owner based. They really need to spend money to get to the next level, and they couldn't afford to do it. And so Crown purchased that business, and it was always the plan to move out of there and become a little bit more challenging the competition. So, but for me, I knew there was going to be. Those guys are good at what they do. Our competitors are good at what they do generally, and so I wouldn't. It's not about necessarily saying they're not. It's about doing something different. And I think
Mhm.
what I brought to Crown, and I think why we've been so successful actually, and we've grown exponentially over the last 10 years or so, particularly since we got this facility, which was. It's about as central as you're going to get in London now. It's just 2 miles from central London from Mayfair. So I knew we had to do something different. And so our way of doing things is just very different. We're just a real can-do bunch of people. I think I try to put my own stamp on it, because if you was to ring me, David, at 11 o'clock at night and say, I need this by 7 o'clock in the morning, if he was genuine about it, then I'll get it to you by 7 o'clock in the morning,
Wow.
because I'm here to help you further your interest in the art market. But obviously, if you kept asking me at 7 o'clock, then we've got a bit of an issue, because maybe you're taking liberties now. But generally, we're here to, and that's what we've got. We've got a bunch of people here who do that and are motivated to do it. Get paid for doing it, of course, but I think you've got to want to do it, not just
Yeah.
do it. And
Yeah.
so I've built a great team with people who used to work at competitors and got great knowledge now. And I like it. I think it's a great place to work.
I know that a lot of listeners, I mean, we were doing a master's in logistics, but it was, unfortunately, we realized it was too niche, so we've gone back to doing it as an elective. I know that most of them will have never been to like a logistics location like yours with a warehouse. Obviously, there's always a warehouse because you need place to store these physical artworks before you move them, and when and of course Sotheby's and Christie's both have quite well-known warehouses in and around London. Sotheby's down at Greenford, and and whenever I do take students like to Greenford, their eyes open because they're just used to looking at works of art in an art gallery or a white cube space, and suddenly they see like a Damien Hirst spin painting just leaning, in a dusty corner of this huge warehouse, and it becomes completely different. And when I remember visiting your location for the first time, and I was impressed by that anyway, but it wasn't. Maybe you can say something to the listeners about the architectural layout of it, because it's not just a warehouse. Maybe you could say something else about the other functions of your building.
I think, as I mentioned, it needs to be a little bit different from our competitors, and I think we've got a lot of savvy people in the art market. And I think when we're so centrally placed, where our clients want to see, generally come in because they want to either view artwork or they've got some activity they want to do at our warehouse. It should be in keeping with what they know, right? They don't want to come to a dusty warehouse and truck oil all over the place in the yard. They want to come somewhere where it's in keeping with the art market. So we've got exhibitions we put on. We've got artwork available to buy, which is created from the staff. It's just set out in a way which, for example, our viewing rooms, you don't go through a warehouse to go to our viewing rooms. It's completely confidential. Our clients can meet their clients and look after them. We've not got to be around the place. It's an extension to whether you say their gallery or if they're an advisor, their business. It just creates an environment where they can be comfortable in furthering their interest in the art market. And we've got a nice bunch of people. And I think what I'm really proud of is the team we've got. As I mentioned, they're not arseholes. And I've got no issue if the apprentice in the warehouse meets with an art advisor. I encourage them to say hello as they pass. Don't hide anyone away, because that person's got what they bring to our business is as much as sometimes I bring. We're all linked. That can't be anything without the guy who's 18 and the apprentice, or my top sales or move person. It's a great place. I mean, it's unique. It's not the biggest, but it's just really nice. I'll try not to over egg it because it feels like I'm doing a sales pitch, but.
Well, no, what
surprised me, you have to see it to understand it.
What surprised me when I walked in is how friendly you and everyone else was, whoever they were. Sometimes you take a car into a garage, and the ones that you go back to are where they're really not, they're nice to you as well. They treat you with respect. But some people just aren't very respectful, and I noticed everybody was nice. I was surprised coming down that through Stockwell, to suddenly walk and going into this, what felt like an industrial estate, and seeing your warehouse and seeing your trucks, and then walking into this beautiful sort of like office space, with coffee machines and a reception desk and works of art on the walls. That's what surprised me. And then you took us.
You're right. It's a bit of a change in mood, isn't it, from outside when you're walking in? And,
that's what surprised me, and I think it surprised the students as well. And I also remember the first time I came down to you, I think I brought my son Inigo there because he
He
was
did.
he
He
was really
did.
interested in he worked for a year in Greenford, Sotheby's Greenford,
All right.
and he had great experience there. Considering he was the educated one, he he felt no sense of anyone sort of taking the mickey out of him. What was quite funny is that if they had some posh client that was being problematic, they'd say, Inigo, come and talk to this person. He'd sort them out. It's so funny. And he had all these amazing stories. And I'm not kidding you, David. At the end of that year of work, he'd never studied art history, but I can tell you he probably knew a lot more about a lot
Yeah,
more art and cultural objects than any of my art history students who
yeah,
come with their degrees. That
yeah,
was amazing. And I remember you really kindly told him, he was quite small at the time, I think, and you said, would you like a ride in one of our air ride trucks? So, and that was fun. He loved that. But maybe you could tell the listeners about your truck. I think most people would, they see a truck outside Sotheby's or Christie's with art coming out of it, and it just
yeah.
looks like a normal removal lorry. But can you say how it differs very often from a normal
Yeah, yeah. I think if you think about the biggest trucks, a removal lorry would probably cost you 100,000, whereas a fine art truck would cost 150,000 to buy. And they've got air ride suspension, so the suspension's sitting on air, so it takes every single bump very gently, and climate control in the back to keep the temperature and humidity to a level which museums require particularly. Um, Tail lift, security tracking, deadlocks, panic alarms.
Mm.
It's ratchet rails and particular areas where you tie particular types of artwork off to. So very specialised and very considered when they're being built, not off the shelf. So
And
it does
is
become a
there a
problem.
custom company that builds them?
Yeah, there's a few,
Yeah,
but it does become a problem when vehicles off the road unexpectedly. You can't just go to a hire company and go and
that's
buy,
true.
go and rent a truck for a week. So that
Yes.
does cause a bit of a problem. But yeah, it's very specialised. There's a lot of the equipment we use is specialised as well. But I think just probably wanted to go back to the thing you were saying about when you came into the facility, and I think I always whenever we do the educational lectures, I always say that it's a little bit like dating in your 40s, the art market,
Yes.
and that's that you've got a particular. You're gonna have to work with me on this one because I've probably not used that as an analogy before. But if you think you've got 100 people, about 100,000 people, right, who have got the capability of buying artwork to the value that would be interested in using my service, yeah. So then out of that 100,000, maybe only 10% of them are looking to use someone else because 90% of them are married. Therefore, they use another company and they're happy with the other company. So now I've only got 10,000.
Mm.
Out of that 10,000, half of them want to do it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So now I've only got 5,000. And out of
Mm.
that 5,000, half of those, they've got their hired help to do it, the man in the van.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're down 2,500. And so all of a sudden, if you think about how many people in your area you're looking to date who you're attracted to, then you haven't got much of an option, really, have you? By the time you've
Yep.
whittled it down. So, and it goes the same with the clients in the art market because that was a terrible analogy, but I do
No,
make these analogies
I think
on
it's
the
a very
spot.
good one. Yep.
But the reality is, when you look at how many clients, and that's why they're clients, because if there's only potentially 2,500 potential clients you've got access to,
Mm-hmm.
then every client has to feel special
Yes.
because that's one less, right? You're going to get, and potentially that one knows someone else who knows someone else, and that
Yes.
one who might have got a bad service is going to tell another 10% of those people, and all of a sudden you've got a smaller client base. So
Yes.
when you do get a client, you really have to look after them.
It's very similar to the auction houses because
Yeah,
if Sotheby's don't treat their clients with the respect that they might expect, and we all know that some art collectors aren't very respectful as well, so it's a skill to be able to do that in a tactful way. They're just going to go down to Christie's instead. So it's similar, I think, with you, that you've got to
yeah,
keep these people, and they will then tell other, it spreads. It's that business model, isn't it?
it is.
You were talking about climate control in the truck, and I assume that they're probably quite comfortable to do long drives across Europe in. But that the word climate makes me think. What I was going to ask you, David, is has the pressure of sustainability been like irritating to you in art logistics, or is it helped you to rethink and and reposition the art logistics industry. I'm not just thinking about, you know, trucks on roads burning fuel, but also the packaging that you use for transporting art. Just talk a little bit about that.
It's funny you use the word irritating to the art logistics. I think some people do see it as an irritant. I think the irritating thing is not knowing where to begin. And we're fortunate enough in Crown that we've got 4 people who so there's Crown's part of a bigger group in the UK of 500 people and 4 businesses. So we've got 4 people who just look after sustainability, and you know, we come up with ideas, they test them to make sure they are sustainable and not a greenwash. And so, you know, we've got a lot of accreditations at Crown, like EcoVadis. We've just received a B grade in another one, and you know, I think we're really advanced in that. But we did a lot of carbon literacy training here. Everyone's had carbon literacy training, and it's an online mandatory course in our own university that you have to understand your own impact. And I think we all probably acknowledge that there is an issue, and our clients acknowledge there's an issue, and it's becoming, I mean, National Museum level now. When you picture a job, they put out a tender request. 10% of the scoring there is now sustainability related. So, you know, whereas before it might have been 50-50 price quality, but now it's 40% quality, 50% price, and 10% sustainability. So you really have to demonstrate it, and you have to walk the walk and make sure what you're doing isn't just, you know, it's going to go and plant a tree. You know, you're actively, you know, we've got our sustainability goals. We've gone for we picked out 4 of the UN goals, and I think, you know, we've got an full fine art electric vehicle coming next month. We've just opened an online shop which is going to be launched in 2 weeks, which repurposes things from the art market. So you'll see more about that in due course. But we also carbon reporting, talking to packaging, for example. We've just innovated a fully paper-based sustainable packaging for international shipping. Whereas before there was use of polystyrene, which isn't easily recycled by the person receiving it. So there's loads of things you can do. And is it an irritant? I don't think we've got any choice in the matter, really. And, you know, yeah, you can, you know, trucks are a lot less emissions now, and that's always in your thinking when you're buying another vehicle. And there's always a gap between cost and practicality of electric vehicles at the moment. But I think that if you put your head in the sand, you're going to get buried, because if you think this is going away, it's not. And I think we've all got an obligation to our children. I mean, we can talk all day long about business. And
why do you want to bring a child into the world? Yeah.
Well, you just said it, you know, just well, your grandkids. What's life going to be like for those guys?
Absolutely. And
Well,
it's on the news
about
again.
AI, I wonder what's life's going to be like, you know.
It's on the news again this morning, wasn't it? Now I think Keir Starmer's pulling out of the promises he was making about Green. So we're getting no political parties, well, none of the 2 major ones in this country seem to be behind it anymore. And yet, look at the weather. Look at what's happening with the weather. You've got to do. It's just going to be too. Anyway, we won't go down that path. Talking about irritants that you can't do now. I was just going to ask you how you've coped with Brexit. Because obviously what we hear in the news is people like you that are moving, in your case, art across national borders, particularly into the EU and back from the EU into the UK. Has that caused, what kind of problems has that caused, and what were your solutions?
Well, I think we was quite ahead of the game, actually. So we can clear customs at our warehouse. So we drive through borders and don't clear up borders. There's been some delays from people who have not been prepared for it. But I think generally I would say the higher end art market are pretty well versed in it, understanding what you can and can't do. There's a group called IceFat as well, who's a group of agents like us across the world, and we've been sharing information. That's one of the strengths of the group, and the affiliation was that everyone in member countries would talk to each other and work out how it's going to work. So I think generally it's been all right. I think for me the impact's generally been on the lower value end of the market. And I think
where there isn't such a good profit margin, I guess, and
because you've got to pay for the service ultimately,
yes.
Right? But if there's a crossover value where it becomes cheaper to buy across borders, but that's not for a few £1,000s. So you know, so at the lower end, you tend to find that there might be a bit more of a struggle.
And
But
if you could get the ear of, like, say, the Minister of Culture, I guess it would be, what would you ask them to do that would be most useful for you and the art world in the UK?
the art market in the UK.
Yeah, what would be the best thing that the government could do to make life easier for art logistics,
Um,
if anything?
I think you put me on the spot there a little bit. I don't think there was anything I've probably got the intellectual
Well, you
knowledge
know,
to
you hear
really
some people
suggest.
say, saying, "Oh, you know, like you will hear like contemporary art dealers saying, stop resell royalty rights," although that doesn't seem to be a big issue at the
Yeah,
moment. You know, you might hear them saying, you know, make it zero VAT when you're moving art around. Would that
yeah.
make a difference to you?
I think it would help us pick up.
Mm,
I think if I look at the art market overall, I think some of these sticking points are, for example, export licenses. To
yeah,
get cultural licenses is still a paper-based application process.
yeah,
Surely there must be a database. And I think they're trialing one now actually, but a database where you can apply online for an export license. It gets approved online. You get an instant copy, and it then goes back into the export licensing system. So, but
yes,
you know, you talk about across Europe and import declarations have to be made in certain provinces, particularly in Germany, for example. You have to register an artwork in the region you're importing it into, which wasn't around before. So in France, they've changed the law on exports, where if you was a private person, if it's over a low value, I'm going to say I think it's 6 or 8 thousand euros, then you have to pay export tax on it,
yeah.
whereas that wasn't the case before. So I think hey, it's a complex web, isn't it?
Absolutely. I was going to ask you, you know, my question was what types of art produce the most problems as regarding moving them around, and maybe what's the most difficult material you have to deal with. Can you think of some examples of problematic
Yeah, I
ones?
think Eve Klein's always interesting with the pigments.
Yes,
Um, I,
because of the blue.
yeah, yeah,
Mm,
yeah, yeah. I would say that I mean, museum objects are always can be challenging sometimes, you know, because well, it's owned by the nation, right? They've only got
yeah,
one
it is.
chance. Commercial, you know, if you look at two of the same object in the commercial market,
Mm.
they send an Addison Lee motorbike sometimes to go and pick it up. You know, whereas in the museum world, it's a specialised truck, like you said, with the air
Yes,
ride, climate control,
yes.
specialist rates. And I think some of the most challenging tend to be just generally museum objects,
Yeah, because I
and
guess
because
they have like a lot more like aspirational regulations, don't they, for that, for the objects that they're dealing with? Yeah, and also that, am I right in saying there's a lot of state indemnity, which, so you know, they haven't got the normal insurance company, and that
that's
might
right. Yeah,
affect the
you're
way you
right.
have to
It's
deal with it.
underwritten by a government generally in most
Exactly,
instances because
exactly.
you couldn't afford to commercially insure it. But I
Yeah.
think when you go into the real collection care level of a
Hmm.
museum, it's so specialised. You know, they have
Yes.
conservators trained,
Yeah.
qualified to handle and understand every single intricacy of that object. And
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
and so when you are handling something like the ashes,
Yes.
and your listeners will have to look that up, and the fragility of that, and the off gassing or the grease on, you know, all of those little shocks and changes which can affect that goes beyond the understanding. You can have a broad knowledge, but it goes beyond the real understanding of an art handling company or someone who works within it. It's that
Mm.
specialism which makes it really difficult.
I suppose
So
just general fragility as well is an
general
issue.
fragility, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess you're
Yeah,
used to, in the art world, in art logistics, you're going to be used to that sort of thing, perhaps more than other companies. But I've just thought of a really, I don't know whether you want to answer this question or not, but I've been asked my opinion about should the Parthenon marbles, they're wrongly named that in my opinion, because it's more than just the Parthenon. I've said this on national radio. I've been asked about the current debates about should they return to Athens. If they decide to move them to Athens and they come to Crown and say you've got to move the Parthenon frieze to Athens, how would you do that? Would it be a problem?
but how would I do it logistically?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
How
with these
would I morally do it?
huge. Well, no. How would you do it yesterday? With these huge pieces of marble, and I mean, how would you wrap them, and how would you?
Yeah. Well, I think there would be. We've had objects not dissimilar to that before, actually, in the
Okay,
past few years. So, yeah, I mean, everything's possible.
yeah,
There
that's
are
it.
specialised companies who are better than us at doing that kind of thing as well. Everyone, as I mentioned earlier on, everyone's got their little niche in the art
Mm,
market, and I would say, would moving those be our specialism?
hmm
No, there is a company who are specialised in doing that.
hmm
So again,
And
sounds
you're
like
not
I'm
going to say
promoting
who it
someone
is.
else. No, I'm not going to say who it is, but it sounds like I'm promoting someone else. But the level
Would
of
it would
equipment
it
I've
go?
got,
Would it have to go in a truck or by sea or by air? Which would be the preferable?
I think to Greece, it would probably go by road,
Yeah,
and it would be under escort the entire journey, with multiple stops on the way in
yeah.
secure premises, security, lots of coverage. I
Mm.
don't think anyone would insure it going by sea.
Absolutely, yeah. And David, finally, could you maybe just tell us about a day in your life working in Crown in art logistics? Maybe, what happens yesterday or well, yesterday was no, yes, yeah. What happens from the moment? What time do you have to get up and get into work, and what then
What time
happens?
do we? Well, you might notice from the last time you saw me that I've got bigger bags under my eyes now. So I've got a 9-month-old and a 3-year-old, and I wake up so many times at night at the moment that I don't even know if I wake up at 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, or 5 o'clock.
You're
Just
walking
happen, I
dead.
just wake up, and so a typical day yesterday was okay. It was quite a good day yesterday. Went over to one of our other branches. We had an induction for new starters across the whole of the group, and I talk about fine art and say what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's quite rewarding. And then it was month end, so I did the whole of the finance month end, looking at the P&L, looking at a number of financial things that we have to look at every month. And then I had a meeting about sustainability, then a couple of client phone calls. I didn't see a piece of artwork yesterday, and I think that's the variation to the job, because today I'm at the Art Central. Spoken to quite a few of our technicians this morning whilst I was loading trucks. Had a meeting with marketing today. Every day is different, and I think I'm fortunate in that my career has got me to the point where every day can be different.
Rather
Um,
than just doing like a repetitive packing or
yeah, but
sweeping.
I've done the repetitive, and you've got to
Yeah,
do the
you
repetitive
deserve
to
it.
get. Yeah, you've got
I,
to do the bread and butter to get the cream.
Another
It's like
thing I say to my students that even though you've got a degree and now you've got a master's degree with the Sotheby's brand name, don't expect necessarily to go in at the top level into a job. You might have to work in front of gallery, maybe even for 2 years. I've had very good students who've had to do that, and I've said just be patient. They're
yeah.
after they're looking at your attitude, and all of those people have then been moved.
You've
And
got to earn the right. You've got to earn
you've
the
got
right.
to earn the right. Exactly. So, David, thank you on behalf of the listeners. I think that's been
All right.
brilliant and fascinating. And I know this subject a lot of listeners who are interested in art just won't know about. And I hope they all have an opportunity to visit somewhere like your premises at some time, and that they might be surprised at the way art appears in those premises, but also in the professional way in which you handle
Yeah.
these things. And
Yeah.
so, thank you very much. And hope you can be a guest again, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. And I think that the door's always open. You and I, we both enjoy talking to people. So, welcome any contact from your listeners if they've got any interest in the art market. Then
Yeah, get in
so
touch.
it makes our life interesting,
Yeah,
right?
and in the literature that accompanies the podcast, we'll put some links in so that they
Oh,
can
good.
contact you if they're interested. So thank you, David.
No worries. And I'll see you around. Take care.